Want to kind of speak on some kind of like sociological, psychological type conditioning. You can look into something called this Milgram experiment, and it shows how like this kind of mindset of perceived authority, like people will really take it and run with it, and they'll give themselves over to the uniform and kind of disassociate from their true identity, and that allows them to turn sociopathic and psychopathic. So this is one of the ways this is triggered. Okay, in nature, there's this dude showed what turns a grasshopper into a locust. A regular grasshopper turns into a locust, but what it is that there's got to be a overcrowding of them, and from these things bumping off one another, they turn super aggressive, and then they just all of a sudden band together and then just go out devouring things. And in Revelations, it talks about the locust from the pit, and there's also armies, and like the Red Horseman army, and then there's also the hosts of heaven that come down to fight at Megiddo and all that too. But okay, there's a phenomenon. Have you ever met someone who's came out of prison after a long term, and they had, like, if they were in a really hardcore prison, a lot of times, like, you'll see these dudes out at the bar, and you won't even be looking at them, and they'll be like way across the room, and they'll be like, "What's your problem with me? What you looking at?" And they'll be trying to test you, but it's like, look, normal people with space and less, they don't have to defend every look, every gesture, everything doesn't have to be challenged. But these guys, what happens is when you're constantly challenged, it's like an arm's distance. This is my personal space. Someone who's been institutionalized in prison, all of a sudden, since they've been confined, their radar goes way out far, and it changes their sensors, like of perceived disrespect, kind of like it. They turn very tribalistic. Like, look, if you dishonor the code, you gotta, you know what I'm saying? They gotta defend their honor. And it's like, and it was like totally over nothing. It was like, I wasn't even looking at you. I was trying to read that poster behind you, for instance, or something like that. And then you thought I was trying to make eyes with you, but I wasn't. And it's only because you've been you're still carrying that amped up residual weirdness. And another way that this works is, for instance, have you ever noticed when you're in a car with people, for some reason they get a lot more vocal and loud, and like they're easily provoked into some kind of confrontation, conflict, arguments. They happen a lot in cars, and also road rage. And for some reason, once again, because you're in this little confined space and you're looking around and you got all these threats around you, for some reason it like switches people's, like, their mindset switches. And it's just like in prison, the people, when their normal boundaries get blown way out of proportion, disproportionate, and they're like hyper vigilant. And you can see this comes from, basically, it comes from an indoctrination. It comes from a institutionalization. It comes from socio-engineering. It comes from scientific engineering, because this was done scientifically to make the whole prison system schematic work. And even our whole society really is built on the same kind of Milgram experiment, legalese type of word magic kind of world, man. I mean, it really is literally, like, if you really look at the Machiavellianistic writings and dictates of our world, man, if you really study them and see that they are purely Machiavellian, and everything is, and that's the whole reason why these things are kind of, see, what it is now, I see the locus effect happening with our internet, because it's like there's constant like, oh, you didn't like my Facebook post, who are you? You know, I see this same things going on with our electronic interaction with people, like prison. Your awareness increases and your boundaries dissolve, and they become bigger and greater and greater, when it should just be like, look, you ain't violating my personal space, I ain't violating yours. You go about your business, I'll go about mine. But for some reason now you're going way over here, but this person perceives it as a trespass because they've been getting hit. That's just the way it is on the internet. It doesn't matter what opinion you make. If you make an opinion, you become a bigot because you don't believe in someone else's opinion. Which, you know what I'm saying? To have an opinion makes you a bigot. And listen, to have an opinion isn't always just a bad thing. Sometimes opinions can be wrong, they can be right. So I mean, look, just to make a stand on an issue is to be a bigot, because I mean, that's the way these words work, is to discourage you from even. It's to discourage you to the point where you ignore everything with fear of being considered a bigot, when it's a misconception and misuse and out of context kind of way to use the word in the first place. And this is just one of the ways that they do these type of things. And also with the invasive privacy issues, you know, I see the airplane up in the sky. Like my freaking awareness, look, is that helicopter following me? I mean, it feels like that, and it's not necessarily their fault. They might incrementally, they don't realize that the effect of this constant fear mongering that the media does to me through what I got to see. I got to weed through a lot of media stuff to get to the real nuggets of truth. And some of that stuff has an effect, like the fear, paranoia, hyper awareness, hypersensitivity to certain maneuverings. They say that's why they say things like terrorist. It's to invoke, to get you into an emotional state where you're more suggestible to a deliberate outcome that they want to bring about, forced about outcome. So once again, this is all engineering, and I'm just showing you ways that this transpires. And I mean, in prison, the threats are real. Maybe that type of a hyper boundary awareness, you know what I'm saying, is necessary in that environment. But then out in the streets, you're going to add you a lot of freaking problems. Same thing with the awareness of Big Brother and the eye in the sky and all that, and how they're maneuvering. You know, it's good to keep an eye on, but look, if this long-term helicopter is causing me to wig out here, and it's rubbing off on my up and close personal peoples and wearing on them, you could see how they can, you know, they can manipulate through diverse and versatile ways. You know what I'm saying? Especially if you have all these things working together. You know what I'm saying? You got operatives in place that have already been cracked. Like they got that institutional broken boundaries meter. And, you know, you got the helicopters flying around, and then you got these scientific people that with the Milgram experiment, and then you got all these invasive kind of anti-privacy kind of breaches of trust and boundary. That's the thing. You trespassed. So it's like, look, you're already trespassing on my you're past my boundary already. So I start off like being pushed, you know, or it's like someone comes right up to the edge of your boundary and stands there, and like you can't go forward, but if you move back, then they move in more. You know what I'm saying? If you go to the left, they just keep subtly moving in, encroaching. That's the word I'm looking for. And, you know, they can trigger those kind of mindsets. Like I said, the prison, broken, or in the car when you're driving, the road rage. That's the reason why road rage happens as well, because you're in a confined space, but you got to pay attention to everything that's going on around you. So it puts you in this kind of uh, reactive kind of a mindset. So, and it just triggers that kind of change in the way your mind is operating anyway. It's like different modes of your mind are suitable for different conditions. So, same thing. You can't act natural in prison because everything you're doing is being watched because everyone's fucking boundary is broke. That's all they got to do is look at one another, you know, and analyze every fucking thing that everyone does. So because it's boring, and then, you know what I'm saying. Once again, same reason why the Milgram experiment, the authority figures abused the prisoners is the same thing. It's because it's boring, and they get off on the excitement from being able to exercise like their authority or perceived authority. You know what I'm saying? And they're quick to start upping the ante and like really bending the rules and tweaking the rules to where it's like it's straight up a sadomasochistic kind of just yeah it's bad stuff. So you can look into that Milgram experiment. Then you can look into the prison institutionalized mindset where it breaks boundaries to where it doesn't shell anyone in, it actually breaks them open so their boundaries huge. And in the car, the same thing happens in there because you're in a confined space. It changes your boundaries, and that's why road rage happens. And then once again, locusts, under certain environmental circumstances where they bump into each other too much, because you got to have other grasshoppers like every time they're jumping, they're bouncing like popcorn. It After so much of this, these things like a chemical, a pheromone switches on, where these things go into this kind of this mass horde swarm mindset. And I'm wondering if all this subtle probing and encroaching and this kind of feeling institutionalized in the free, you're free, but you're in a prison anyway, and of false reality and media and fear. And are they trying to trigger that same effect that happens to people that are in prison, that breaks them, that turns them into more bloodthirsty, more cutthroat, more competition, more I need a preemptive strike to preserve myself type of a mindset? And maybe that's what they're going for. They want like this kind of like this urge to purge, you know what I'm saying, type of a thing. And look, there's all these riotings going on, and even that in itself, in the locust popcorn effect, and also you're just it's wait, what is that? That's pandemonium. That's chaos. That is uh yeah. It's like what do what you got to do. Anything goes. Don't get caught type of a thing. And I mean, in a way, people are getting right now. They're getting their value so demoralized, and they're anywhere you make a stand somehow, they're demoralizing your team. So everyone's walking around with the chip, feeling like we've been trespassed upon. But I mean, there's some manipulator guy that's just pinning everyone up against everyone else. He's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like the Joker in the Batman movie, the newer one, where the first guy steals the van, then the next guy shoots him and he jumps in the van with the bag. Then they drive to the bank and a guy comes out the bank, shoots him. Then they go in, fucking start taking over the bank. Then the next guy shoots the next guy, and then finally the guy brings the bag to the Joker. Then the Joker shoots him, jumps in the car, and drives away. I mean, there's a Albert Pike WW3 plan, and it's very scientific and sociological, and very Willie Lynch masterfully Machiavellian and Willie Lynch. And these are some of the categories they're using to drill this in and literally brainwash people.